Sorry, my cameraman's making me laugh. My name is Jessica. Not this is Jessica. My name is Jessica. I'm going to be walking you through the Rustic Love painting that you got in your kit. And thank you so much for signing up and being a part of this amazing fundraiser to support the school. Can't tell you how awesome that is. So we're going to go over a few things that should have been in your kit or should be in your kit to make sure that you have everything. Things that may not be in there, you can go ahead and just grab from around the house and use those. Keep in mind, if you use an old cup, make sure that it is an old one and one that you don't care about, because the paint tends to dry and it becomes a little hard to get out. Paper plates are ideal because you can mix on them, and as soon as you're done, you can just toss them out. But if you don't have any, that's fine. You can go ahead and use some of the ceramic plates or glass plates that you have at home, and when you wash them, it should take out all of the paint. I've never had a problem with it. So you should go ahead and have an 8x10 canvas, a piece of carbon paper, the beautiful stencil of the painting that you're going to be doing tonight. What's great about this is we're going to go ahead and trace it onto our canvas to make it a lot more fun and less stressful as you go along. You're going to need a pencil, possibly a Sharpie for the very, very end. And the colors you should have are black, cobalt blue, deep red, burnt sienna, raw sienna, phthalo green, and white. So we'll go over those a little bit later. Those are just the fancy technical names. I typically just call them blue, green, white, yellow, and red. But, you know, we're going to go technical here. Bonuses, if you have them at home, an easel is quite nice to work with. If not, flat on your table is perfectly fine. To go ahead and get started, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go trace our outline onto our canvas. So how to do that is you're going to take your canvas, put the carbon paper face down. Now you want the shiny side face down. So you'll notice that there are two sides. One's more shiny than the other. That's the one you want face down. And you're going to line the stencil up onto the canvas. And using your beautiful pencil, you're going to go ahead and trace that outline. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so I went ahead and I set everything up a little bit closer so you can see what I'm doing as I'm doing it. I know when I'm watching instruction videos, when people just skip to the next step, it kind of drives me a little nuts. I'm like, am I doing it right? Is this open to interpretation? Maybe that's just me personally projecting. I don't know. Either which way, so I zoomed in, and with our pencil, we have our beautiful stencil, our carbon paper, like I said, shiny side down, and then our canvas. All right, and all you're going to do is you're just kind of going to line it up to how you feel it should be on the canvas. You can kind of move things around a little bit. If you decide that you want a little bit more of the top, just go ahead and slide it down. Just your fingers will give you an idea of where everything is when you go ahead and fold that paper down to the sides. I like to start at the top, so we're going to go ahead and do that. And all you're going to do is just take your pencil and trace the outline. It does not have to be perfect, just more or less an idea of how you want it to look. If you want to go ahead and take your time and just trace it perfectly, that's completely up to you. As you see, my hearts are a little wonky. I've gone over a few outlines, maybe multiple times, because as you paint, those outlines are going to disappear. And you're more or less just going to trace the outline of the things that you want to go ahead and keep as you're painting. For me, it's the bottles. I might go ahead and trace the words because I know sometimes that gets a little scary as you go along. And I'm just doing the basics of the flowers, just kind of like the outlines, not so much the leaves and stuff like that. But if you want to go ahead and outline those leaves, you can. Whatever makes you feel comfortable. We're going to go ahead and do these hearts as well. I'm going to go ahead and skip over the stems and add those in later personally. But like I said, if you want to go ahead and outline them, you can. Okay, so once you're done with your outline, if you notice, if you take the outline and the carbon paper and lift it up, it's got that beautiful, oh, I'm sorry, that beautiful stencil on your canvas. All right, so let's go ahead and get everything set up. Okay, now that everything is set up and I have my paints on my lovely paper plate here, just kind of did them in order. And like I said, I have two different ones because I'm going to have this plate that holds my paint, and then I'm going to have this plate that I use to mix things with. We are going to go ahead and start with the small square brush that you guys have in your kit. I'm going to go ahead and take off some of that excess water using that rag from earlier, or paper towels, whichever you have. We're going to start with this beautiful background color right here. Now, as I'm going along and giving step-by-step instructions, if I'm going a little too fast or you'd like me to slow down, the great thing about this video is just hit pause or replay if you need to. It's my favorite thing about watching videos. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 1 scoop of white and 1 scoop of that phthalo blue, and we're going to go ahead and give it a good mix. It doesn't have to be perfect. Notice some of my white is still peeking out in some of my blue. Then the crazy thing that I'm going to go ahead and do next is I'm going to go ahead and stick my brush into the cup of water, bring that little bit of moisture to the paint, and just kind of mix it around. We're going to do this about 2 or 3 times to thin that color out a little bit, because what we want to go ahead and do is create a wash of sorts. We don't want it to be so thick that you can't see your outline in the background. And notice as we do this, it kind of takes a lot of that excess paint off your brush. So you notice when you first started with your colors, you mix them up, your brush might have been a little bit on the fat side. We call that, or I call that, being loaded. But to go ahead and remedy that, because we did want to create a wash, as I added the water, it kind of thinned it out on my brush. Now all I'm going to do is paint that background. We're going to do horizontal strokes from left to right. And if you feel like it's becoming a little too thick, you can always stick your brush back into the water, kind of paint up and grab some of that previous color and paint it back down. And notice as you're doing this, it's not removing your stencil at all, so you can still see that. You could be really meticulous if you like, and you could just trace around that outline so that you don't get any of the blue in that banner in the background. I'm all about speed and moving to the next step. Sometimes a good thing, sometimes not a good thing. So I'm just painting over it. Same thing with my flowers. But when I do get to the portion where I'm painting my vase or around my vase, I am going to go ahead and just kind of trace around it using the thin edge of my brush, and this is what I call the thin edge, and just lightly giving it a good trace. And if you dip past that line a little bit, that's okay, because that's going to be our brown color, which is going to be darker than the blue anyway, so it'll completely disappear. Same thing, you can use the thin edge of your brush to kind of go around the outline of the flowers. Picking up some water as you go to kind of thin out that blue. Give it that nice washed look. And now that I'm paying attention, I see that I forgot a line or two when doing my outline. Just right down here at the bottom where the vases meet. So I do apologize about that. If there's any areas in this background where you might want to go ahead and make a little darker, you can go ahead and pick up some more of that blue, kind of go over it. The white might have, or the water might have thinned it out a little too much to your liking, so just kind of play with it. When you have it exactly how you like it, what we're going to go ahead and do is we are going to grab our edges. I don't know about you, but I'm not one for framing. It's just not something I'm good at or remember to do, and I almost always want to hang my work on the wall as soon as it's done. So I always paint my edges so that I don't have to frame it. And it's a great thing about these light canvases is you can use a fun little thumbtack to hang up your work. So now that I got the right side, go ahead and do the top edge. And then we're going to go ahead and do the left side, or the right side. My bad. I know my lefts from my rights, right? Also keep in mind if you're painting, you'll want to go ahead and lay down, I should have said this so much sooner, paper and plastic cover over your table as to not get paint on it, unless you don't like the table that you're painting on, and then have at it. Give it a little flair. All right, so once you have that background on there, I'm gonna bring that a little closer. Sorry, I moved it on you guys. Go ahead and wash off that small square brush. Dry it off. And the next color we're gonna go ahead and grab. So we're going to do this burnt sienna color. We're going to do a scoop of that. A tap of the black. Oops, I don't know if you can see it. There it is. Tap of the black. And we're just going to kind of give it a marble kind of mixture. We don't want to mix it up completely. We want the black in there with still some of the brown. And you might need to pick your canvas up off the easel a little bit if you are using an easel, and then just using long brush strokes, go from left to right to add that wood color in there. Don't forget to get in between your vases and trace around your outline. And again, you'll want to use the thin edge of your brush to trace your outline. If you get a little bit of the brown inside the outline, that's okay. We can fix that down the road. Now, if you decide that this might be a little too dark for you, the brown color, you can always pick up some white and streak that in there. I'll show you. And you'll just get like a tiny touch of it on the tip of your brush. Kind of just randomly add it in there and then paint back and forth. If you don't like the way that looks and you're fine with the color, I'd leave it as is. And then again, don't forget to grab your edges. Or if you want it a little darker in places, just kind of go in again. Then don't forget to get that bottom edge. Once that's done, you can place it back on your easel, or if you're painting flat, back on your placemat. Go ahead and stick that brush in the cup of water, give it a good wash. All right. Now what we're going to do is we're going to paint in these beautiful vases with some of the white. So we're going to do a scoop of the white. And then the tiniest touch, and I do mean tiny, of that brown. Kind of going to mix that up. We don't want it to be a vibrant white, just more or less like an off-white kind of color. So you don't need very much of that brown at all, just a little bit. Probably won't notice much of a difference. I mean, it still looks very much white. We're going to go ahead and paint that in. You're going to notice it's going to paint over your outline a little bit, and that's fine. We kind of want that to fade into the background and not be so dominant anyway. If you find yourself where you kind of went outside your outline a little bit and into the blue where I did, you can do one of two things. We can make this vase just a little bit bigger, which is what I'm choosing to do. Or you can go ahead and pick up some of that blue and then back out your vase, whichever you choose. We're going to do this with all three vases. Oops. Kind of got into my brown a little bit there. That's all right. I'll fix that later. And what we're going to do next, as soon as you have the base coat of these vases painted, we're going to go ahead and exchange our brushes for our small round brush. And while that white is still wet, I'm going to pick up some of the burnt sienna. Kind of going to mix it in with a little bit of white that I have left over. If you need more white, you can, to where it's going to be a little bit darker. Kind of using that around the edges a little bit to give them depth. Now you don't have to do this if you don't want to. Again, at any time I'm giving an instruction and you're like, I don't like the way that looks so much, skip it. Make it your own. I think by adding the brown also to these vases, it gives it that rustic look. If it becomes too dark and you kind of feel like you added a little too much brown, you can always pick up white and go over what you've done. It's completely up to you. Also, I've decided I'm going to pick up some of that brown with a little bit of black. And where my vases meet the wood, I'm just going to touch this up a little bit. Because I think in some areas I might have gone a little overzealous for my liking. So we're just going to fix that a little bit. Yeah, I like how that's looking. So the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do is still pick up some more of that white, still using my small round brush, and I'm going to go ahead and try to get rid of a little bit of that blue that I accidentally came too much into my outline. Now, if your paint's still wet, you might want to go ahead and hit it with an air dryer or blow dryer, air dryer. We'll give that a chance to dry a little bit, and we'll go ahead and come back to that. So now what we're going to do is with that same white rustic brown that we did, we're going to go ahead and paint our banners. So again, if you need that mixture again, and I think this time we're going to go ahead and still stay with our small round brush. So we're going to pick up some of that white, kind of a big scoop of it, and then a tiny touch of the brown. Go ahead and mix that up. If you're like me, I added a little too much brown, I'm sorry. So we're gonna go ahead and pick up whites again. And with that brown that's on my brush, I'm just gonna go ahead and create a separate color right next to it. Here we go, that's giving me that off-white I want. So this is what I went ahead and did. I got a little overzealous. Sometimes it happens. Now in this case where your brush is kind of really loaded with paint, I know mine is, if it's super fat, just go ahead and give it a little pressure and twist to push that paint out of there. And then pick up what you need. And we're gonna go ahead and paint in these banners. Let's start with this one. Keep in mind, as you're painting, to be careful because this is still wet and you might get it onto your hand like I just did. And then you don't want to brace your hand on your canvas and smear that white everywhere. You can go ahead and trace around your heart. Or you can go ahead and cover over it if you like and then bring it back in later. I think it might be best to trace around it. But if you like your heart making skills and you think you can just add it in later, no worries. Feel free. Now when I went ahead and did my first layer, I was kind of willy-nilly with my brush strokes. Kind of just went in every direction to cover the area. Now I'm kind of going back and adding vertical lines. Kind of want them all going the same direction. This is going to require 2 coats, so we went ahead and did this one, going on to the next one. Again, be mindful where you put your hand, that it's not in wet paint. And if that's a worry for you, what you can go ahead and do, like I said before, is grab your hair dryer, go ahead and dry off the canvas completely, and then pick back up on this step. What you also want to go ahead and do is while you're painting in that outline, just kind of make sure that you go a little bit past the outline so you don't have it peeking through the painting. Unless you like that look, then go with it. Last one. Don't be afraid to hit pause on the video, catch up what you need to, take a break, and then come back when you're ready. All right, it's a good base coat for now. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm actually going to hit pause on this video real quick. By the time I resume, it'll be like nothing happened. But I am going to go hit it with the hair dryer and make sure that everything's dry so that I can add my second coat here, so that I can go ahead and touch up my vase a little bit where it still sees some of that blue peeking out that I don't so much like. So I'm going to go ahead and dry this off and we'll be right back. Alrighty, so we're back. And again, I'm going to pick up some more of that white that we were using for our banners. I want to go ahead and cover up some of the blue in my vase. And then the one here on the right. There we go. Now we're going to go ahead and give our banners a second coat. Really make that blue fall into the background. While that's still wet, that kind of darker brown that I made earlier, I'm actually going to pick some of that up on the tip of my brush. And I'm kind of going to use it on the edges while that white is still a little wet. There we go. And then without cleaning my brush, I'm just going to go ahead and go back to that original kind of off-white color and giving this a second coat. And again, going to that slightly darker off-white, grabbing my edges, kind of making it a little darker, giving it a little texture. Now, if you don't like this look, you can skip it. I kind of am liking it and digging it a lot because it's helped distracting that blue from the background. This time I still had a lot of that color on my brush when I picked up the original white, so it's almost streaking it in for me. I like it. There we go. Just want it a little darker on this side. There we go. I like it. And then for like the third and final time, I'm just going to go ahead and hit those areas on my vase where the blue was coming in. There we go. Very nice. Now the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and bring in that line that's holding the banners. You're going to want to go ahead and wash off your small round brush. And if you have any of that color left over from when we did our bottoms here, this is the color that you're going to use to bring in that line. Also too, if it's kind of dried up a little bit on you, you'll just go ahead and grab a scoop of that brown and then a tiny touch of the black, and you kind of give them a marble mixture. You don't have to mix it completely unless you want it a little darker. Also too, if you have some areas where you kind of want to paint them in a little bit on the bottom, you can do that. Not sure why, it was just a little too light for me there. Oops. Man, I'm bad about kicking that camera. All right, so what you want to do now, because you are going to want to use the fine point of your brush, is if it is really fat, you're going to keep twisting it to kind of push as much of that paint out as possible. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to stick our brush into the cup of water, kind of bring it to the paint mixture, and we're using it to thin out. So one, so that you have a really nice fine point on your brush, and two, so that when you go to create that line, the paint is watered down enough so that you should be able to do it without it breaking up on you. Once you have it, your brush should look something like this. Now, something I learned a long time ago, the closer you hold up on your brush, the more control over, which is sometimes nice. However, you tend to give it a little bit more pressure than you typically would. The farther you hold back on your brush, the less control you have over it. So when you go to create a line, they tend to be a little thinner. So before doing this line, what I would go ahead and do is I would practice a few times to see where it is that you feel comfortable holding the brush to create the thickness that you like when we go to do our banner. For me, it's slightly kind of in the middle, honestly. Another thing that you can do to help you out is you can always flip your canvas upside down so that you can do the line that way, so that you don't have to worry about hitting any of this paint here. So I'll go ahead and do it now so that I know that I have no worry whatsoever of smearing any of this paint. I'm also going to use the table that I'm on to kind of brace my hand a little bit. And I'm going to start with the line to my left. Then we're going to go here in the middle. And then off to my right. Now, if you want, you can always go ahead and grab your edges where that string kind of came off. Or if that's something that you don't want to do, you don't have to. Like I said, I like to paint my edges. Man, sorry for hitting that camera again. If you want to pick up a little bit more paint, make it a little darker. Or if you decide that's too dark for you and you want to pick up a little bit of white and drag that in there, you can too. I'll show you what that looks like. So without even washing my brush, I just picked up a little bit of the white. And I'm just lightly touching it in there. All right. So now I am going to go ahead and add the white hearts on the inside while it's upside down so I don't have to worry about smearing any of that paint. And this time I'm just picking up plain white. I want it to be vibrant. I want it to stand out from what we already have. Or, you know what I'm actually going to do? Feeling a little whimsy today. I kind of want to tie in a little bit of that pink. So I think when I do my white, I'm going to do a scoop of white and then a tiny touch of pink. We're going to make like an off pink kind of white color. I kind of like it. So it looks like this very soft baby girl kind of pink. If that's still too much, you can always pick up more white, or you can always make it darker too if you like. Because I know our hearts and our flowers, they're all going to be this vibrant red. So let's see what this looks like. You almost don't notice a difference. I'm going to pick up some red. I don't notice a difference at all. Sorry. Sometimes you just don't know how things are going to look until you're playing with it. Or it just depends on the day that you're painting. Sometimes something works for you one day and you're like, man, I'm really digging this. And then the next time you go to paint, you're like, not a fan. So we're just going to use this as our base coat for right now, because notice that background is still pretty wet, so it's pulling up the paint, or at least it is for me. So we're going to use this as our base, and we'll come back to these in a little bit. All right. Flipping the canvas back around. Washing that pink off our brush. Drying our brush off. I think it's time to pick up some of that red and start bringing in our flowers. So we're going to start with just red. See how that looks real quick. So these are going to be our roses. And keep in mind when you're grabbing paint, if you grab a big, huge blob and you put it onto your canvas, make sure you kind of take that away. The thicker that paint is on the canvas, the longer it's going to take to dry. And when you have to go back in and add a second layer or the details in a bit, you'll notice that it'll be difficult because of that blob. When you're doing it, make sure that you cover your outline. We're going to go ahead and bring in these guys. So, fun fact about these guys is, and I forgot to mention it earlier, is if you have Q-tips, you'll want to use those. As a matter of fact, when we get to that point, I will be using Q-tips. You don't need very many, maybe about 3 or 4. We're just giving them a nice little base coat here. Kind of roughly going around the outline. Not going to stress out about it so much because these are going to have a couple different colors and you're going to dot them to separate them from one another. Just kind of want to make sure that you cover up all your outlines. And last but not least, all of our beautiful little hearts. Oops. Almost got it in the blue where I didn't want it. There we go. Give that a few minutes to dry. Now would be a good time to probably go ahead and take a hairdryer to the canvas so that you can dry off all these parts. Also, if you have any Q-tips, you'll want to grab those while you're doing it, so that when we come back, we can go ahead and add the second coat to our beautiful hearts on the inside. If you want to make them a little darker pink-wise, which I think I might end up doing, we're going to do that. Then we will kind of take a break on this, and we were going to add our fun little green parts, so that as we continue to add our multiple layers here, we can go ahead and cover up anything that we might intrude in onto the flowers as we're creating. All right, all dry. So like I said, we're going to go ahead and add a second coat to our lovely little hearts up here. If you have any of that pink, you can go ahead and use it. Mine kind of dried a little bit, so I'm picking up some more of that white and a little bit more of the red than I typically would have. This is kind of what my color looks like. We're going to go ahead and add that in. There we go. Now those stand out. I like it. Now that we've given them a second coat, they actually look like hearts now. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and wipe off some of that pink. And by wipe it off, I'm going to clean my brush entirely, apparently. What I want to go ahead and do now, and I know this is going to sound a touch strange, we're going to go ahead and take a scoop of that red, and we're going to do a tiny touch of black. Whoops, that was a lot of black actually. Yeah, we're going to see how this turns out. Going to go ahead and mix it into that red, and this is going to darken that color up some. So it's going to be a little dark, which is okay, that's what we want, because this is going to be the second coat of our roses. There we go. And we're only going to do that for the roses. We're going to go ahead and wash that black off the brush, or that reddish black. dry it off. And then we're going to take a scoop of the red with our small round brush. Actually, we're going to do 2 scoops. So it should look something like this. And we're going to just tap it into the white. I don't want a lot. I just want to lighten that color up just a touch. Still want it to be the red. And this is what we're going to use to give our hearts a second coat. If you're like me, I kind of went out of the outline a little bit here. So I just went and fixed it. If you find that if you do go outside of the outline and things get a little bit bigger than you'd like, go ahead and hit it with the hairdryer, let it dry, then just add a little bit of white to that area, let it dry. And then you'll probably want to use some of your blue that you used to create the background. You just gotta go through the steps to repair. It can always be fixed or created into something else. You might decide you want to add a second heart. All right, so there's the second coat for our roses. I meant our hearts, I'm so sorry. All right, Q-tip time. So I grabbed 3 of them, and you kind of bunch them together and get a good hold on them. I'm going to use that same red that we just used for our hearts, and I'm going to dab the Q-tips into it. If you decide you want more than 3, you can do that too. I'm just kind of going to dot around here, just the bottom area. Be mindful as you do this. You might have a Q-tip kind of going rogue on you, like I do. I'm just going to go ahead and flip that one around and move it to the bottom. I also think I might want 4 Q-tips. Yeah, I like that. Again, same procedure. Picking up some of that red, dotting it around the bottom. Doesn't look like much right now, but you're really gonna like what it does here in a second. So with that red still in our brush, I'm actually gonna go back to that pink that we used to fill in our hearts here. I'm gonna grab some of that on the tip of our brush, or our Q-tips, and I'm gonna go ahead and start dotting that in. Now, because that red down at the bottom is still wet, it's gonna kind of help you blend a little bit. Because I want these hydrangeas to kind of separate from one another, kind of where that original outline was right here, I'm gonna kind of let it stay a little darker in those areas to just kind of separate one from the rest of them. Bring those dots up. And if you find that working with multiple is too much for you, just use one. Then that way you could be a little bit more precise on where you want your dots to go. And it's so much easier than trying to create these dots with a brush. If you decide you want to bring some of that red in, just go ahead and pick it up and dot it back down. If you go outside your outline, that's okay. Just kind of giving it the texture of a hydrangea. I pray to God I'm saying that flower right. Also too, where I kind of want them to separate a little bit, I'm going to bring some of that darker color back in. These are my favorite ones to do because they just come out so much fun. And I don't know why. Dotting the canvas is freeing and fun to me. Might be alone. Definitely let me know how you feel about it. So now we're going to go ahead and pick up just pure white. Just absolute pure white. We're going to start bringing that in towards the top areas. Kind of covering up our original outlines. Blending in with some of the wet paint. Really just making that fade. We're staying more or less to the top too with the pure white. Dragging it down in the areas where it needs it. And this is where you get to have a little bit of fun. Make it your own. You may decide that you really love that dark color and you don't want so much of the white in there. Or it might be too red. You want to soften it up some. And again, if you're like me where you're kind of losing the definition between the two a little bit, I'm just going to bring in some more of that original red. There's no right or wrong way to do these ones. Although I could sit there and spend hours trying to get it exactly how I want it. I don't know if you guys are feeling the same way. I'm like, I could go ahead and do this, or I could do this. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and call it quits. Otherwise, I think we will all be here all day. Go ahead and put my Q-tip down, picking back up my small round brush. And we're going to go ahead and add a lighter red to our hearts. To do that, I kind of took, the original color, and I did add a little bit more white. It was a little more than I liked. So now I'm just picking up more red to kind of balance it out a little bit. There, I like that. And you might maybe like me where my hearts haven't fully dried from the last coat we did. I'm just kind of going to use that red to streak in with everything. If you notice that it's pulling off the paint and not doing anything you want it to do, I would probably go ahead and hit it with a hairdryer. Really make sure that paint dries. There we go. Also with this color, what I'm going to do with my small brush is now we're going to start to go in and create some of our roses. So what you're going to do is with your small round, kind of push out any paint that you have in there. And we're just going to make swirl motions. You can either start in the center and work your way out, or you can start from the outside edge and work yourself in. There's no right or wrong way to do that. Okay, we'll let that dry, and then we'll add on another color. In the meantime, what we're going to go ahead and do is, if you'd like, is I'm going to add some rosebuds. So to do that, we're going to make like an almond shape using our small rounds. Almond, football, you get where I'm going. We're going to put one there. I think I want one right here. And if you decide that you don't want to add these, you don't have to. I know that they were on the original stencil, and I just didn't trace over them. Yeah, we'll go with 3. Okay, let that dry a little bit. Then what we're going to go ahead and do while our hearts are still a little wet, we're just going to pick up some of that plain white without washing our brush. We're going to go ahead and add some of the shadows into the hearts. Shadows, shines, definition, texture, whatever you want to call them. And if you feel like they're too strong, just too much, and you're not liking the way that they're looking, that's okay. I'll show you how to fix that. We're just going to go in without washing our brush, picking up some of that second color and just kind of going over it a little bit, giving it that blended effect so that the highlight isn't so strong. There we go. And you can keep doing this till it turns out the way you want. Might take a few tries. Yeah, I like it. So now we're going to go ahead and add in our next swirl. I'm again just picking up some of that pink that we used to create the hydrangeas here. I'm just picking up some of that with my small rounds. I like to reuse colors. Starting from the center and working myself out on this one, or again, you can start outwards and come in. Just kind of stay at a circular kind of motion so that we can create the shape of that rose. And these are kind of whimsical roses, so they're not going to be perfect, which is one of my favorite things. I was going to use that light pink a little bit on these buds to get rid of some of the background that's peeking through. Washing some of that pink off my brush. See what happens if I grab just red. So the original red that we originally used. No, not a fan. We're gonna fix that. We're gonna let that dry some. There we go. And the color I was using to fix that was the color that we used on the inside of the hearts. It's also the same color I'm using over here with the buds. There we go. Oops. That's okay, we'll fix that. What we are going to do with the buds though, while they're still wet, is we're going to wash off our small round. And that original background color that we made for the roses, that dark red, I'm just picking up a little bit of it on the tip of my brush. And to create the shape of the bud is on the outside, so we're going to start with the one here in the center. On the right side, I'm just going to use light brush strokes to kind of create a darker line just on the outside. And then starting somewhere in the center, going off to the left and coming down. Trying to create the inside of that bud. Doing the same thing on the one in the center, only I'm just doing the outside lines. And then on the one on the bottom, I'm just kind of creating a line here in the center. And then just right here at the tip on the outside. I'm going to take some of this color again and kind of bring in some of the dark back into the rose that I took out a little bit. There we go. Now they look the same. I want the center in the middle a little bit darker. And you might want to play with these till you get them exactly how you like them. They might be a little bit more vibrant, but I really like how that came out. I'm going to jump back over to my roses, or my hearts, grabbing a little bit of that light pink on the tip of my brush. And for the ones that I feel like I took out the shadow a little too much, or the highlight, I'm just kind of bringing it back in. All right, so now those are done. We're going to go ahead and bring in our greenery. We're going to use phthalo green and maybe some of the raw sienna. I'm going to start with a scoop of the green and then some of the raw sienna. We're going to mix it together. Yes, that's what we're going to do. That's giving us that leafy green color. Sorry, I thought I touched my canvas. I'm going to roll off some of that extra paint, giving myself a nice little tip. And I'm going to go ahead and start with over here with my roses. I'm going to start with my tiny bud here. From the center, I'm just going to go ahead and create a line and just bring it into the vase. There we go. And then for the one here, just bring that one. This one's basically in there. We need to imagine where this line will be, because notice how it's kind of hiding between these flowers. So we're just going to pretend like it falls behind that rose, picks up here, and drops in. Same thing for this one. It's going to fall behind the bud and then pick back up here. And for the one on the end, it's going to start here and kind of go in. Now we're going to add our leaves. Kind of want some greenery sticking out from this rose here, this one here. Yeah. So because I don't want it to intrude into the banner, and I made it a little bit taller than I wanted to, so we're going to go ahead and just create a leaf shape here. One here, and then one here. And of course, like, it's those curved lines that you're going to do to the left and then another one to the right to really create that almonds leaf football kind of shape. There's no right or wrong way to do it. I want a little leaf coming off right here. There we go. I'm going to have one come in from this bud here. One right here. Yeah. Because these are buds, we're just going to create little green at the end. You know how the leaves like to cover that up a little bit. There we go. Now what you can do is, if you want, you can pick up some of that just yellow on the tip of your brush. Kind of use that to streak it in. If it's pulling up some of your paint, I'd go ahead and let this dry. That's kind of what it did with me here. I'm going to let that dry a little bit. I'll wash off my brush in the meantime. And now we're going to make a chocolate brown color. This color we're going to use to do the stems for all of our hearts. And how you do that is you're going to do a scoop of this burnt sienna and a scoop of the black. We're going to do equal parts. You're going to mix it, and it is this chocolate brown color. It comes off looking black. If it's too much, you can always add more of the sienna to lighten it up a little bit. So we kind of want these to be thin lines. So we can do one of two things here. You can paint them with the color that you've just done, or you can use a fine point Sharpie. Remember how I held the Sharpie up earlier? That's where that's going to come into play. Because you can either paint your beautiful words that are here on the canvas and paint the stems, or you can use a Sharpie to create that fine line for you. So I'm going to go ahead and paint because I've already mixed it. And I'm just going to drag it down. And you're kind of just going to bring the stems or sticks to where you think that they would fall inside the vase. How you envision them looking. So this step does create or require a light touch. You do not want to give a lot of pressure to your brush at all, because the more you push down, the thicker that line is going to go ahead and be. Also, while we have this color, I'm going to go ahead and bring in my words. Same concept, very light pressure on your brush. And I know this part is always a little scary for some, with it being a darker color on such a light area. I always find myself getting closer and closer to the canvas when I have to do tiny things like this. Somehow I think that that's going to give me magical powers and everything's going to work out. if you were having the problem that I was just having where things were getting a little too dry on my brush, I went ahead and dipped my brush in a cup of water, added it back to the mixture, and kind of went over everything. Here we go. I'm washing my brush off. So now what I want to do, because I kind of want to hide some of those brush marks that came into the vase a little bit, that off-white that we had created, which is just a scoop of white, if you need a reminder, or yours dried up like mine did. Scoop of the white and a tiny touch of the brown, and you're just going to mix that together to create that off-white color. What I'm going to do with this color is kind of where those stems came in on both sides. I'm just using this to kind of hide them, so they look like they're in the vase and not outside of. Also, I'm going to use this opportunity to kind of fix up a little bit of the areas from earlier now that the canvas is really dry. There we go. Perfect. Now you can, if you want, you can go ahead and give your leaves and your stems a second coat, but I kind of like that they're a little bit see-through. It gives them a little bit of texture all on their own without me having to go in and adding the tiny little leaf marks and going from there. So we are officially done. So the only thing that really has to be done at this point is to sign your canvas. You can sign it anywhere you want. You can do it with paint. You can do it with a Sharpie. I recommend the Sharpie. I am a fan of signing mine on the sides. For me personally, signatures on a painting, I tend to be more drawn towards the signature, which very much may be the point, than I am the painting itself. And because of that, anytime I paint, my signatures are on the side because I want people to notice my painting before my signature. But to each their own. I just want to thank you so much for doing this with me today and being a part of this amazing cause. And I really hope it's something that continues to grow. Have a good one.